Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to talk all things yard. Not your front yard, not your backyard, but the yard at your warehouse. One of the most important parts of the warehouse and very integral to the operation overall. And we're going to talk about why it's so important and how to address it and how to think about it in maybe a different way than you have been thinking about it before. And I'm going to be joined by Matt Yearling. He is the CEO over at YMX Logistics, and they are all about the yard. And I have to say, Matt, too, personally, is all about the yard from what I could tell from his career experience. So we're going to dive into that topic today, and we're going to hear about how YMX is addressing the yard, helping to manage it, and also what we can see in this space and some of the potential gaps that maybe we're missing when we look at our operation or supply chain as a whole. So, Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely. Happy to get you on here and happy to talk about this topic. I think it's a very interesting one and very important to our industry as a whole and our operations as well. So before we kind of dive into the meat of the conversation here, why don't you just give us a brief overview of YMX Logistics and what it is that you all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been in existence for coming on 2 years now. Pretty much executing a thesis, which I'm sure we'll go into. But basically, we've acquired a couple assets,
Mm,
really just solely focused on what would it mean to drive value within the context of yard, right? Within the four fences, outside the four walls, because that's where we see what the opportunity is, just because it's underserved, and just the opportunity to actually lean in and drive value there
mm,
is quite significant. So we're executing a thesis that we have strong conviction about, and it's resonating with our customers. And I think we're fast becoming one of the fastest growing 3PLs that is a pure play 3PL
mm.
on just the yard. So we've grown quite rapidly in the small time that we've been in existence. And yeah, like we started in 2 states, we're in close to 20 states and rapidly
Nice.
expanding within the US.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And I have to say, your background, right? This is not your first foray into the yard world. So you've had a focus on this kind of, and I'm curious, like, what is so attractive to you about the yard, and what keeps you kind of focused on this arena of operations or just in general?
Yeah, no. So if you look at my background, I'm an enterprise software kind of guy,
Sure.
right? So I've done many different enterprise solutions. The area that I've found the most interesting for me is the application of technology for real world problems, right?
Mm,
I mean,
okay.
it's like if you're looking at optimizing, you can see how that's optimizing a physical environment, and you're actually moving physical goods. And we all know how incredibly important supply chain is.
Sure.
So it was of all of the enterprise technology enablement opportunities was the most relevant to me, and that's where I spent the most time, both not only in the maritime terminal from a marine terminal perspective, intermodal, but for me, inland manufacturing and distribution
Mm,
represents a big opportunity because it still to this day lacks sophistication, technology enablement, but the opportunity is quite significant. And it's just, as I said earlier, it's just one of those areas that is not well understood, doesn't bubble up in terms of a priority uh, for operations, and still lacks some opportunity around technology, right?
mm,
And it's not not any one single technology element that could drive value. It's like holistically, how do you do that for the of best served for those operations that you're engaged in? And every industry's got a little bit of a nuance associated with how they use a yard as it complements their operations. And so, yeah, no, for me, it's one of those areas that was really interesting,
mm,
and represents an opportunity. I'm always looking at what's the dynamics of the market, what is the potential opportunity of looking at into the future, and working with customers and pulling them into the future.
Mm.
Not only looking at driving short-term value, but really looking at how to sustain a sustained trickle of innovation and value over time to really drive home the message that the yards are just, kind of a pot of gold in terms of opportunity for customers.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, interesting, and it's interesting you categorize as a pot of gold for the customers. I think that's really interesting. Let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, when it comes to the yard itself, right? I mean, I guess on a simply put, right, it's a place where the trucks are going, right? Trailers are getting dropped off, picked up, and all of that is happening, and then ultimately making it to the dock door to unload, right? But from an operations perspective, I mean, what in your opinion should people be thinking about from the yard perspective, and maybe like, in that sense, like what is most often overlooked about that area of the operation?
Well, so I think, well, the vast majority of people really don't understand the yard,
Mm,
and I would say that this is a general perspective across the board.
sure.
You could take the world's largest supply chains, and you can see that instantly. I've had the luxury of engaging with pretty much every single large,
Hmm.
operation out there, and it's very clear. I mean, if you look at the pecking order, right? Transportation monopolizes the spend, right? So that takes most of the conversation, and then warehousing, manufacturing, distribution takes like the second half, and then the yard is not significant. It's not. In some cases, the yard is seen as an extension of the warehousing. Sometimes it's a seen extension of the transportation, but they all look pretty much similar in terms of the general lack of understanding of what the impact of that is in the operation.
Mm,
And that plays out even if you try to look at, if you talk to a shipper and they're spinning up a facility like a greenfield facility. They know really how to scope out the sophistication and the throughput and the equipment
mhm.
and the structure within the warehouse, but they have no clue when it goes beyond the dock at
Sure.
all. They don't even know. They couldn't even tell you what would be the optimal size of the yard, what would be the optimal, uh, inputs and outputs of the yard. How do we set up the gate? How do we do all of these things? It just because there's not a lot of information around best practices,
Mm,
a maturity model or anything like that associated with how those operations work. So, you know, what level of autonomy would you require, or anything associated with technology enablement? Nobody really truly understands the yard that much to understand. They either have a transportation centric view
mm,
or they have a warehouse view, but they don't really understand what happens in between.
mm,
So yeah, every single industry has a different use case associated with the yard, but where we try to spend most of our time is how to translate that for the customer. The buyer, as I say, is an orientation around warehousing or transportation, and then how do you articulate the value associated with that as it relates to that? Um, and so anyway, yeah, every industry's got a different requirement around the yard, not well understood. How do you come in and provide the same level of sophistication that occurs inside the warehouse, inside the four walls to inside the four fences?
mm,
How do you upgrade that experience for the customer? And then how do you take them on a journey for optimization? And how do you drive value in other areas of the business that have a significant overlap within the yard?
mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think those are really interesting points there, and that's like a very interesting point too about either being transportation minded or centric or warehouse focused, right? And I think in those regards, like especially if I think about warehouse focus, like I'm thinking like, okay, well, this is how many square feet I need, right, to house my inventory and do my operations and all those things. But, am I thinking about, well, how much like yard do I need to support that? And, am I, doing a lot of drop trailers? So do I need more space and all these different things? I think that's really interesting kind of call out there to think about that. So now tell us, I guess, about how YMX is approaching this, right? Because when we talk about yard management in a lot of sense, it's mostly software solutions that are out there that we see talked about, but you're combining software with assets as well, right? So tell us a little bit about the approach and how YMX is managing these yards.
And it's changed over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you look at how a focus on yard management existed from the early days, in and around the 80s, people said, okay, maybe there's a different style of operations, different style of truck,
Mm.
right? That we would need to apply for this specific new thing called yard management, yard operations,
Yeah.
spotting, shunting, whatever you want to call it. So you would see that 3PLs would start serving that. It's not a strategic focus. It's not important to them.
Mm.
It's just kind of like an add-on. And then you started seeing, coming into the 1990s, 2000s, specific logistics companies that were focused on that.
Mm.
And then you see the TMS and the WMS thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's an element here that we're not covering very well. And so the whole category of YMS, right, yard management systems come up. So that's, my past life, right? So
Sure.
both terminal operating systems and yard management systems. And how do you kind of within that facility, orchestrate that inventory as within that trailer or container as effective as possible. And so what I have seen is that even when I was the CEO of Pink, right,
Mm-hmm.
which is now Calaris, the there was only a few solutions out there, and now you see a plethora of technology associated around the yard. But they're there are a lot of widgets that people are trying to uh, introduce to drive value.
Mm.
But the thing is that, as you know, technology is only good as how you operate that technology and how you
Sure.
apply that technology. And so what I have found is that unless you're looking at this in a vertically integrated way, you're not necessarily going to recognize the value of all of the elements that are appropriate for each specific customer and industry. And so what does that mean? Well, so to be honest, it's like if you look at where all the biggest spend is, it's associated with the assets
Mm.
and the drivers, the people operating that facility, from a yard perspective. And then if you couple that with the relevant technology, whether or not that's technology that the customer has already acquired or technology that we can apply on behalf of the customer, it's that intersection between both technology enablement to drive optimization and value, and really where all the cost is associated with that, and looking at this holistically in terms of a package of services for the customer in a different way. Whereas ultimately, what they're looking for is, again, moving between the gate and the dock as effectively and efficiently as possible,
Mm.
right? So it's that intersection and what we call our differentiation, our yard operating system, which is it's a combination of not just YMS. YMS is just a slither.
Sure.
It's the extended platform of technology enablement, broader than a YMS, and then specific operational practices, procedures, and a life cycle associated with how do we take a customer on an optimization journey
Mm.
from the initial experience throughout, to continuous improvement with the customer. And so that's how we look at it. We look at this as a more of a well-defined operating system, and how we're defining the experience, the value, the opportunity to engage with a customer in a different way. And we have, I would say, we're pretty unique, right? Because we're very specialized and focused as a 3PL.
Sure.
And then we've got different perspectives as well. So I'm a technology guy that's focused on this area for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also have operator type, those that have operated in a 3PL. And then we've also got a customer perspective as well, consuming these services. And so we have a complete 360-degree understanding of what does it mean to drive value for the best value that we can for our customer. And And so that's what our differentiation is. Our differentiation defined within the category of a yard operating system, and how we bring that to the maximum effect for the customer, and take them on a journey that has never been delivered for a customer before,
Mm.
right? For whatever reason, going back to what I was saying earlier, it's underserved. People haven't really leaned in and looked at this through a different lens,
Yeah.
and seeing and understanding the challenges, and then taking them on a journey and identifying. And what I find, and I've this is we've done this many times, is that the initial value proposition isn't where the value is.
Mm.
It's the value proposition that actually starts the engagement and starts the relationship. It's the value that you create post initial deployment, and in the next couple months
Yeah.
you uncover some value associated with how you're leaning in on that operation and driving value for them. And yeah, I think it's pretty powerful. I mean, we're also very open to collaborate, with other parties too, whether or not
Mm.
that's 3PLs or shippers directly or whatever. We know that, not trying to be overconfident, we know this more than most in the industry, and so um, we feel like there's not a single environment that we haven't been able to drive value to, especially if you're operating at scale.
Mm.
So that's, yeah, that's what we do. We have an operating system. We lean in. We upgrade the experience. We take them on a journey, and we drive value for the customer.
Mm.
Because ultimately, we're not incented to, because of this intersection. We're not singular focused on trying to sell technology, and we're not singular focused on selling trucks and drivers.
Mm.
We're focusing on what is the combination of that to drive value for the customer.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know that we're going to get more wallet share of that customer if we really focus on what is the best interest for the customer. How do we make it a win-win for us and the customer? And we attach and we expand, across their network. So yeah, so that's what we've done, um, and we'll continue to do, and it's resonating with the industry. The people are always looking for areas of increasing uh, the ability to execute more effectively.
Mm.
And this is an area, as I say, underserved, not well understood, lacks technology enablement, uh, is such a small slither of spend.
Yeah.
People don't spend much time thinking about it without understanding what the impact of it is. If you understand the impact, then that's kind of like the first step, and it's like, okay, then truly engage somebody like YMX to be able to come in and do this more effectively.
Mm.
I mean, what we do see is half the market insources and half the market outsources.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like a Walmart as an example, they insource,
Mm.
whereas others outsource, right? And so I do truly believe that it's not necessarily a strategic differentiation for any of these companies to do an effective job at the yard.
Mm.
But if you've got a professional in here doing it effective for you, then it's going to actually drive significant value for you in terms of execution and how you're going to do certain things in your operation. So I don't think insourcing is the right strategy for any people.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, if you have a partner like us to lean in and effectively execute for you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting there. And you mentioned something there about, having kind of the impact, or not necessarily understanding like the impact, right? So maybe, for people that are listening and, are resonating with what you're saying, and the fact that they're like, oh, I haven't really thought about my yard in that way, or what does it mean to optimize that? Maybe you can tell us kind of and highlight some of the impacts and what can, I guess, potentially go wrong, right, in the yard, that if you're not managing it to the level that you're suggesting, or trying to optimize that yard. Like, what are some of the potential negative impacts that could happen
Well, there are too many. There are too many to mention.
there?
Okay,
Sure.
there are too many to mention. I mean, it's having certainty around. Like, I mean, like, you can just rewind the clock back I mean, a good example is if you remember Amazon, you know, the big kerfuffle. I don't know if it was 2012 peak or 2013. I think it's around 2012, 2013,
Mm.
when they when there was a finger pointing exercise between Amazon, UPS, FedEx, right?
Mm.
Well, so for a e-commerce perspective, what do you care about? That you have the available empty pool of assets to fulfill outbound velocity,
Yeah.
right? Well, if you, UPS or FedEx, didn't know where all your assets were and that you're managing the pools effectively for one of the largest retailers, right? Then that's a problem.
Sure.
In that situation, Amazon was telling UPS and FedEx where all their assets were, and they didn't have enough in the right places.
Mm.
Okay, so that specific example was definitely a case where an effective yard operator would know what to do and how to be proactive in that regard, so that it wouldn't degrade in that manner. We've got a recent example, which is classic. Okay, manufacturing site.
Hmm.
Okay, arbitrary. Their operator around the spotting shuts down soon as they see anything relating to thunder and lightning on the map.
Mm.
Okay, so what does that mean? Why are they doing that? Why is that their SOP? Is it safety, or is it what is it?
Mm.
Okay, so you're taking a production line down for that period of time whilst you're dealing with clouds going over the facility, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on a golf course and you've got those alerts to say,
Yeah.
hey, go back to the clubhouse, you got thunder and lightning coming, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, and you look at the map and you say, well, it's not really that close to us,
Mm.
right? But if the facility is not shutting down for inclement weather, then operations don't shut down.
Mm.
If it was like overhead and it was causing a significant safety concern, well, yeah, absolutely, right? But sometimes it's just random operating procedures that cause operational impact for the facility. And another case in point, even if you've got like Securitas doing your gate,
Sure.
right? Okay, well, how many gates do you roll up to, in your truck, and you see, four folders of paper that you need to fill out to actually get in that facility,
Hmm.
right? I mean, that's just like so much low hanging fruit, but that basically articulates the vast majority of gate operations in the U.S.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. The list goes on. I mean, issues around I'm manufacturing and I use the yard as an extension of my warehouse, and I need to pull up. I need to pull up and offload specific inventory to fill the production line for that specific day. Well, where is that inventory? How is it being orchestrated? How is it being timed, etc. So that's an area where, from a manufacturing perspective, I mean, I talked to one of the largest engine manufacturers in the world that you would know. I'm not going to
Hmm.
say who it is,
Sure.
okay? But they said we don't do that. Okay, we go on site and it's exactly what they do. Okay, that's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
What they say they don't do is exactly what they do. It's like, well, how do we make that experience better?
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, what other? I mean, there's just so many different examples where they're not looking at the yard in a specific way. There's some of it that's being built up based on urban legend in terms of how these facilities operate, and rather than solving the real fundamental process and how things are executing, they just throw assets and people at the problem.
Mm.
Oh, you guys out in the yard are slowing us down. Oh, but we need another yard truck and like three drivers. It's like, okay, in the scheme of things,
Yeah.
okay, a couple $100,000 a year, that's not a problem.
Mm.
Whereas, okay, that's the spend,
Mm.
that's a band aid. It's not actually solving the really fundamental problem that you're trying to solve in the first place, right?
Mm.
So there's a number of different issues associated with uh, uh, yard.
Yeah.
And again, another one, right? A grocery is a very good example. It's like, what do you care about? You care about getting all of the inventory loaded into your warehousing, right? Then you stage distribution DSD to the stores. How do you orchestrate that? How do you orchestrate what power unit to the right asset? How do you stage that within your facility to fulfill what needs to be done during that day? So if you look at the sophistication and how people are doing that, it isn't very sophisticated. There's a lot of pen and paper.
Yeah.
There's a lot of whiteboards.
Mhm.
People don't know how to do all that stuff. And so That's really, when you look at these opportunities, it sounds very archaic and doesn't sound believable, but believe you me, it's amazing. It's amazing that you actually go to the store and actually buy a lot of this stuff, and you understand where this stuff is.
Yeah.
It's just crazy stuff, right? Reefer units. Nobody's checking the temperature right,
Mm,
right? Nobody is checking how much fuel's left in the reefer units. It's Yeah, the list goes on in
I see
terms of
that.
all
Yeah.
of the war stories and hideous environments and everything else. Like, there's so much low hanging fruit
Mhm.
that um, it's embarrassing that not a lot of people are really looking at this very differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the stuff you highlight there certainly calls attention to it, and makes people aware. And I I love the example where you're saying they're like, oh no, we don't do that, and then it's like exactly what they do, right? But that's so often the case, right? You talk to like someone higher up in the organization, oh, there's no way that we do that, right? Couldn't be possible that we do that. Doesn't make any sense, right? And then you go actually on site and like, well, yeah, actually that is what we do, right? So very interesting there, and obviously, a lot as you highlighted of things that can be better, or even can hinge on having a properly managed and looked at yard to be able to do that. So let's shift gears a little bit here, because you're managing these yards, and you're utilizing EVs, electric vehicles, for shuttling the trailers and containers and things of that nature. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of comes into the fold, and also how that helps companies with some of their sustainability initiatives as well.
Yeah, so we look at sustainability in two different ways. Okay,
Sure.
so again, um, what typically happens? What typically happens is, I'm a retailer or whatever. I build a 500,000 or 1 million square feet facility. I have no clue how many slots that I need out in the yard.
Hmm.
And they say, okay, maybe 2 or 300 is going to be good enough for this type of facility. Well, it depends. I mean, if you're a grocery, you got over 100,000. If you're sorry, over 1,000.
Mm,
Same with a Walmart DC. If you're an Amazon fulfillment center, it's like 2 or 300, right? So it
mm,
depends on what you're talking about. When we look at these facilities, and we've done many of these different studies over time, and I've done it in my life, is you look at how these facilities operate. What's driving the ins and outs of that facility, of that operation, the warehouse. So, I mean, depending on your e-commerce versus store delivery, whatever, it's like you see some folks are looking at it from a zone perspective, etc. So the point here is, we can look at a facility and we can light it up and we can see, hey, we have an opportunity to optimize how you do business. Going back to this, what I was saying earlier,
mm,
how do you apply the same level of sophistication and look at how that operation is, what the speed limits are, what is how does the yard trucks operate in that facility, and what does that look like, right? So, from a sustainability perspective, we have an opportunity to take empty miles out of the equation. So that's one. So technology in itself can drive the sustainability angle. But when you look at the superior asset to be able to orchestrate the yard, EV is by far the most superior asset to
mm.
be able to do that with,
Yeah.
because because of not just the sustainability goals, but when you look at the use case and you look at the average mile driven by a yard truck, it's no more than 10 to 15 miles a day.
Sure.
It's a perfect use case for a captured EV within the facility. It is the most appropriate and cost-effective means of actually using power.
Hmm.
It's also, from an experience perspective, from a driver perspective, infinitely better. I don't know how many drivers I talk to. They go home and they're washing off black soot from
Mm.
themselves every day,
Yeah.
right? Because they're always in and out of that cab, hooking and unhooking trailers. The noise, the power, the experience from a driver retention is just far superior. But everybody looks at EVs and think, yeah, but that's so expensive. It's like, well,
Mm.
yeah, unit cost is more expensive than
Sure.
a diesel asset, but it can pencil out, especially when you're looking at the longevity and the reliability associated with the maintenance of an asset. Okay, I mean, I can tell you right now, if you talk to the largest provider of EVs in the yard space is Orange EV, right? So they're
Okay.
definitely They're the ones that have been around for a while. Well, they've had assets out there for more than 10 years. They've not had a single battery replacement. So,
Oh, really? Interesting.
so
Yeah,
the only thing that really requires maintenance for the most part is lubrication,
sure.
right? So it is a far superior and more reliable way for this specific, truck within the the supply chain. Now, over the road's a bit different, but shuttling and truck within the facility of the four fences, absolutely, it's the most superior way. It ticks more boxes than it does a diesel asset,
Mm,
and so that's what we've seen, and that's what we're leaning into a lot as well. So today, I would say it's about 50-50 in terms of adoption.
okay.
Now, obviously, with the current administration, a lot of the belief around EV is not quite there,
Hmm.
but we still have incentives from a state perspective. But even without the incentives, you could still get it to pencil out.
Mm.
As I say, it's a far more efficient, effective asset to be able to execute within the confines of the four fences than the diesel is, and reliability is a big factor associated with that. Reliability and um, not just sustainability, reliability, and what's the word I'm looking for? Um, uh, and just the customer experience, the driver
Mm.
experience. We can't discount that
Yeah.
because we have drivers fighting over the use thereof of an EV,
Really
right?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they know it's a superior way of doing it. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it's I would say it's definitely the most superior asset to be utilized within the yard.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely great points there. And I think, one especially important one there is like, when you think about the actual usage, right, in terms of like miles driven, right, and it makes total sense that you're saying like, the one company has a battery replacements in 10 years, right? Well, I imagine like the miles on those vehicles are, I mean, they're pretty low still, right? Because they're
Yeah.
only doing, like you said, 10 miles a day or 15 miles a day, which is nothing in the grand scheme of a vehicle, like to be doing that. So very interesting there, and very good to hear that you're embracing that and going in on that, not only for the sustainability aspect, but then also for the experience aspect, which I think is very critical as well, because working in the yard, you want to keep those people that are out there as safe and as comfortable as possible, to be able to do that. Now, if anybody, I think, could talk about future innovation in the yard, I think it's you, Matt. I think you are through and through a full on nerd about the yard. We can say it sounds like you spend a lot of time focused on this and you really understand the problem. So tell us, if we look towards kind of the future and what other kind of innovations can happen within this yard space. I mean, what do you see there, and what do you see the yard kind of evolving to?
So I think there's a number of different potential technology disruptions.
Hmm.
Uh, just like you look at some level of autonomy and operations inside the four fences, sorry, in the four walls.
Sure.
Human is not taken completely out, right?
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, and there's some rare occurrences, or there's a lot of occurrences around ASRS, and depending on how does that look like, complete lights out. Um, it the yard is a little bit different. So the way that we view this is that there are a lot of different enabling technologies that are complementary to the challenges in that environment. Um, I mean, a classic example is if you as a human being are looking at something, you can identify, right,
Hmm.
and capture that information and do something meaningful with that information, then the promise of computer vision can do the same thing, right? Whether or not that's around gate acceleration
Okay.
uh, and capture digitalization of assets coming in at that facility for either security, you know, uh, you know, lost loads, damage inspection. There's a number of different, or just general accelerating within and out the facility. There's a lot of opportunity associated with computer vision. Um, that's the traditional use case around the gate today, right? So there are
Mhm.
many different players out there that are trying to drive that value. But there's also specific use cases within the facility around computer vision as well, between the four fences and the four walls. Some other big, theme is autonomy as well, right?
Mhm.
Autonomous trucks. When where you see most of that right now is over the road,
Yeah.
right? And if you've got a door, or sorry, if you've got a car and you're like a Waymo,
Mhm.
it's an autonomous car, but it leaves it to you, the human, to open the door, get in, put in your instructions, and it takes you from point A to point B, right?
Mhm.
And there's some regulations associated with what public infrastructure you can have that car going over. But the point here is that that's in and itself a very difficult use case, right? And doing an autonomous vehicle over public infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, in the context of a facility inside the four fences, it isn't quite as easy as that, because you've got to not only reverse up to this massive asset that you've got to pull out of a specific spot. You've got to couple that asset with all the relevant glad hands, right? And then you've got to move that and reverse it in specifically into a specific slot. And again, do all the activities associated with the opening the doors, the seals, and anything around that, right? So if you're trying to make it completely autonomous, that technology is not there,
Mm.
right? So now, is autonomy useful? Yes, but it's again point A to point B, right? It's
Sure.
like, hey, I need to do stuff on the front end. I need to press the autonomy button, and then I need to do stuff on the back end.
Mm.
So, so autonomy is definitely got some promise, but it doesn't. You can't say I'm going to have a completely autonomous yard. It's kind of in this day and age a bit impractical to be thinking that way.
Mm.
However, you know, we do engage with autonomy. We have got many different applications that we're looking at around autonomy,
Okay.
and there is specific use cases that we would want to apply the autonomy to, but it isn't right to really fully automate the whole experience today. Now,
Mm.
maybe in the future, maybe not. I mean, coming back to the yard, there's a lot of complexity associated with all the moving parts associated with it, right? So there's no one solution, and based on different asset types, different trailer manufacturers. There's not a one size fits all in terms of how you would automate all that experience associated with it. So I would say emerging technologies around computer vision, AI.
Yeah.
AI is a big category. Everybody overuses and abuses that. I mean, we're pretty
Yeah.
much making decisions
Mhm.
on behalf of the customer on a daily basis. So whether or not it's our system automatically doing that or AI, we've got all that. How do you digitalize and capture as much intelligence about what's coming in at the facility? That's important. How do you understand where all of the trailers are in that facility? That's important. How do you try to automate the movement of those trailers in the facility? That's important. So there's a number of different technologies that I say we're applying, we're engaged with, and looking to embrace that more as time goes on.
Mm. Yeah, fantastic, and definitely very interested in seeing the computer vision type of applications. And I think that's prevalent throughout the industry. I think there's going to be a huge kind of wave of computer vision solutions and applications coming in the new year, and we've already see a bunch in 2025 too. So really interested to see that, and also the autonomous grow as well. So very interesting to talk to you here, Matt, and really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some insights and your passion about the yard here, and highlighting some of the things that people are missing out there. And it sounds like it's a really kind of underserved and not necessarily fairly looked at part of the operation, but also a necessary part of the operation too, to be ultimately successful and be as successful as possible. And I think there's a lot of key aspects that you pointed out there. So really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your insights. And if people want to learn more about YMX Logistics, or they want to get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Well, certainly you can reach out to me directly at myearling at ymxlogistics.com or hit our website at ymxlogistics.com.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, Matt, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Thank you so very much, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.